Welcome to the Head Over Heels podcast, dedicated to helping you build the business and life of your dreams. We'll be sharing tips on management, leadership, strategy, marketing and mindset, and much more. Let's get started with your host, Angela Cedran.
Welcome to another edition of Heads Over Heels. Today we're going to be talking about how to break those chains that are holding you back from really achieving the life that you want, whether it's running your own business, whether it's your dream of traveling, whether it's your dream of traveling overseas and living a laptop lifestyle. But we're going to be talking how about to get you out there, visible, how to help you find your voice and really live the life of your dreams. Today, my special guest, Carmina Aguirre. Carmina, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today, Angela.
It's my absolute pleasure. So first of all, tell me where you are.
I am coming to you from Florence, Italy.
Oh gosh, one of my favorite cities in the world. Tell me, you're clearly an American girl. How does an American girl end up living the dream in Florence?
You know, it's such a great question. As a child, I remember wanting to live in Italy. And now that I'm over here, I have people asking me all the time, oh, you must have family here. Do you have an Italian background? No, I don't have family here. I don't have an Italian background. I just had a passion for Italy before I'd even come to visit. And I had the opportunity to come for my 30th birthday, and I fell in love and decided I was going to do whatever it took to make it happen.
Well, I can totally relate to that. So I'm going to be back in Italy next year, and I'm going to be running 2 retreats in Italy next year again. Definitely one outside of Rome and maybe one outside Florence or in Tuscany somewhere, because it honestly is one of the most beautiful places.
I absolutely agree with you.
Look, I'm really excited to be talking to you today. You've got a fascinating background. You used to work in the Air Force, helping people with trauma and overcoming a lot of the issues that they've had. But you're not doing that anymore. You left the Air Force 6 months ago. You took this massive leap and decided to start your own business. So what made you feel the fear and do it anyway and start this business?
You know, I'm really blessed in that fear is something that I actually appreciate the challenge of. I'm not an individual that will let fear hold me back. I want to take it. I want to understand it. I want to feel it, and then work at releasing any of those barriers that are holding me back and push forward and advance. Mm-hmm. So I took the leap to be over here in Italy and to live the laptop lifestyle, which you were saying earlier, and still be able to help people overcome their emotional adversity, turn their wounds to wisdom, but do so from the place of my dreams.
Yeah. And it's pretty brave, I have to say. You know, you mentioned you don't have family, that you don't have a base there. So really, did the Air Force life get you used to that sort of travel?
I will say that I believe both the Air Force life and then my upbringing. So I moved quite a few times as a child, and I definitely moved within the Air Force. And I guess the military definitely gave me some tools to learn how to adapt. But I think that if you really want something, you have to go after it.
Yeah, you do. You do. And, you know, I know a lot of women don't have the self-confidence to actually lean in and say, I'm gonna accept feeling this and I'm going to do it anyway. But the thing is, once they do that, then you are really able to achieve your dreams, because you're not going to find them hiding under a rock.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm really interested to explore the business that you have now. So when we met, you spoke to me about some of the programs that you have. You've mentioned to me Heal Your Soul. I was very interested into Wounds into Wisdom, which was about forgiveness. Can you tell me a little bit more about what exactly it is that you do?
Absolutely. So some of that background that you mentioned I had earlier with the Air Force and working with trauma led me to understand also the aspect of coaching. So now I do more work, and the shift came in line with a little bit more of life coaching, forgiveness coaching, and helping do soul healing. So the Wounds to Wisdom is actually focuses on overcoming emotional adversity and on forgiveness. So when we are holding on to negative emotions, it's actually holding us back in life. And, we probably all have somebody that we need to forgive, whether it is a mother, a father, siblings, a romantic partner, a friend, a boss, coworkers, a neighbor, the plumber, who knows? So, obviously there's varying degrees, but by taking some time and, again, sitting with these feelings, understanding where they came from, and then working on the forgiveness aspect, forgiveness is something also that isn't necessarily done just like in the blink of an eye. You have to put a little bit of work in it.
Yeah.
But the thing that a lot of people also don't understand is how much forgiveness of others is actually helping you heal and live the life that you want to live. Because if you're holding on to this animosity and you've got, a grudge or some frustration or anger towards an individual, then that's negative vibrations, and it stops you from being able to manifest those things that you're actually wanting.
That's really interesting. So, we've really almost gotten straight into this point of how to break those chains that are holding you back from manifesting the life that you want. And by the sounds of it, this forgiveness is probably the first crucial step to that.
I believe so. I believe it is one of the most important steps. And it's not just forgiveness of others. A lot of the times it's forgiveness of ourselves.
That's really true. Yeah. And sometimes we're so much harder on ourselves than anyone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I can catch myself, we all have this wonderful thing called negative self-talk. I like to call it the bitch, because that makes me, for me, then it's easier to kind of put her back into her box.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and I remember the other day, a big client emailed me, a big corporate client, and said, look, we're coming on board. I've just signed the contract. And the first thing that the bitch said to me was, how the hell are you going to do this job? And then I went, no. I've been doing this a long time, baby, and I can do this. But a lot of my negative self-talk comes from my childhood. I was raised by a perfectionist father who's the most wonderful man, but he really thought perfectionism was the most wonderful attribute, and that's how you really developed excellence. And my dad put me on my first diet when I was 9, because I've never been a skinny woman by any stretch of the imagination, and he felt that he was helping me. But what that manifested itself in was really an eating disorder, which for a very, very long time, I would say 25 years, really plagued me, and it held me back, and it made me feel that I wasn't good enough, essentially, which is crazy, because, good enough for what? And I know a lot of women have this idea of, I'm not good enough, you can't do this. And I think there is an element of forgiveness in there. There's an element of saying to this inner child, you are loved and you are nurtured and you are capable, and I actually forgive you. But the other thing as well is, you're right about forgiving people around you, because I could very easily say, well, I hate my dad, or I hate my boss, or, I hate my ex-boyfriend, whoever he may be. But all of that energy that you carry around, it's so wasted, because you could be using it on the positive. But what advice would you give to people? If you work with somebody and you say, listen, you've really got to work on this forgiveness element, how would you suggest they go about doing it?
So, there's variations of tools and resources. And obviously I have the program of Wounds to Wisdom that is available also as a digital product that people can use. I do the life coaching, but I would say for anybody out there, to start working with a coach or a counselor or a therapist, to start that process of, overcoming your own emotional adversity and your personal trauma. And then I would guide people towards compassion and The other thing would be to help manage expectations, personal expectations.
Tell me a little bit more about those last two. So you mentioned compassion. So I guess for me, would you say forgiveness and compassion are intertwined in some way?
I absolutely think so. Yeah. So forgiveness, so people can be compassionate without taking the action of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think that we've forgiven somebody, but meanwhile, it's still festering down below a little bit as well. Yeah. Sometimes. So compassion, though, on a bigger scale, to me, is being that kind, generous, serving individual by spreading love, support, and understanding.
Yep.
Okay. And so they're extremely closely related.
Love, support, and understanding. So if I had to take that back to, we were talking about breaking the chains that are holding you back. If I had to really break it down to that, how would you talk to women, or how would you counsel women to really start that forgiveness element and start practicing compassion for themselves, on themselves?
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the ways in which I help people with this is actually take, in fact, the example that you were just using with your wonderful father who had reached out to try and help you in what he thought was helping you, right? Yeah. And so he was taking action with compassion towards you. And as you're circling around, you're actually having to have compassion and forgiveness for him, in that, as you mentioned, the way that it had manifested was actually ended up being a little bit unhealthy. But the understanding aspect within the compassion is knowing that they didn't do it with, the intention wasn't necessarily malicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So, and the other aspect of it is that, we're all, to some degree, a product of our environment, our culture, our religious, or spiritual beliefs. And so the compassion aspect is knowing also that each person is on their own individual journey. I believe also in things such as past lives and reincarnation, and how there can be past life karma or lessons that you have in this life to work through and to overcome, as well as the things that you inherit in your ancestral DNA, the themes and problems that are things within the family that were given as lessons to overcome in this lifetime. But by handling these people who, whether it was intentional or unintentional, may have harmed or threatened us in some way, by having this compassion and knowing that they're on their own little journey and they've got, issues that may be similar to ours or different in some dynamic, but they have their own spiritual growth and journey to work on as well.
And they're only human as well. I guess as well, for those of us, and I mean, I adore my parents, and they're both two wonderful, wonderful people. I love them very much. They actually live with me. But for those of us who still struggle with issues around our parents, I think the big realization for me one day, when you're a little kid and you look at your parents, they're kind of like these gods that can do no wrong, and we look up to them and we absolutely idolize them. And then one day, somewhere along the line, we realize they're just humans trying their best like us. So for me, whenever I've been angry with them, and I'm sure they've been just as angry with me over the years, don't get me wrong, I'm certainly not the most perfect daughter, but it's just taking it back and saying, well, you know what, they're only human like me. And
right.
Most parents and most families do come from a point of really good intention. Well, one thing I'm very fascinated about, you mentioned the story of past lives and the stuff that we inherit in our DNA. And certainly this concept of inheritance through the DNA, something Deepak Chopra talks about as well. I'm keen to explore this past life concept a little bit with you. So how do you delve into that? How do you know that you've been there before?
In a past life, you mean?
Yeah.
So that's such a great question that I'm trying to think the best way to answer that. I actually, instead, may I tell a story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So in my youth and definitely, through good portions of my 20s, I remember I was really struggling with sexuality. So I was struggling in a way that because I was pretty promiscuous and I didn't have a very strong religious upbringing. And I started trying to figure out, like, is there a God? Am I going to hell for this? Like, what does it mean to not be a virgin and try and be spiritual? And, these things that I think are fairly common questions in life for many, many people. And I was having this complete emotional breakdown one day. I'm like tears and sobbing. And I decided, I'm going to go see a spiritual advisor. And this was not the first time that I'd ever been to a spiritual advisor. And I was living in Jacksonville, Florida, and I drove out to this area called Casadega, Florida. And it's about maybe 30 minutes outside of Orlando, towards the east. And I met with this woman who did past life regression therapy. And I went in there and had a session, and I remember at first I was very frustrated because I didn't understand the process, and she was taking me into hypnosis. And I remember feeling like, I don't see these things that she's saying, I don't see this, and I just paid a lot of money. And what had happened was I'm very intuitive, so I had jumped into my higher self very quickly without even needing to go down this path of the hypnosis to get into the regression. So I'm telling her what I saw and how I was seeing these like stars. I felt like it was like I was in Star Wars and I had all these stars just flying by the side of my head, and how I felt like I was looking into like the white light particles of the car beam, right? The light of the cars. And so she's like, okay, start gathering these particles. And what do you see? So I'm gathering the particles, and they created these images of like dove, Mary Magdalene, baby Jesus, God, angels, cross, like all these biblical signs, right? Or spiritual signs. And so then we started gathering these particles, leading me into the life. And in this past life, I was an 8-year-old boy that was living in a monastery, and I saw myself like waiting in line, doing meditations, being in like the group dining hall in the military. We'd call it a chow hall. And I would, hit the gong. I'd go out on these little serene, like kayaking kind of things. And as we wrapped up, she had shared with me, like the sum of that was that I was a young boy that was living in a monastery in my past life that never experienced sex. And so in this life, I was having this period of promiscuity as a way to kind of balance that karma or create the equilibrium from that past life. Mm. And then the other thing that she shared with me that was within her 25 plus years, she had never had a patient that jumped right into the higher self. And it was such an interesting experience. And that was one of the times that I was like, oh, okay, so this intuition thing that I actually have is kind of real. It's very fascinating. But I really liked, so that story was how I first came to terms with understanding and accepting past lives, because it resonated with me. Yeah. And the questions that I had that day.
Well, that story for me also shows me how you found a way to learn to forgive yourself and to show you compassion, because I guess the quest that you were on to resolve this issue of, is this me? Should I be doing this? Am I going to hell, as you said? And if you were thinking you were going to hell, you must have been in a space where you felt you were not doing the right thing. But what it sounds to me like is that you found a way to forgive yourself and to be compassionate and to make sense of it so that you could move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm. That's really interesting. The third thing you mentioned to me before when we spoke about this concept of really breaking those chains that are holding you back so that you can move forward, really be positive, let go of the fear, and manifest the things you want in your life was around managing expectations. So we've spoken about the forgiveness and the compassion, and in many ways those things are intertwined. But can you tell me a little bit more about this concept of managing those expectations?
Absolutely. So in managing expectations, there's, a couple examples that I can give, but let's just go into the world of dating, okay? Because I think at the end of the day, we're all wanting, love and romance.
Yeah.
And in managing expectations, especially within, a romantic relationship or the potential beginning of one, is being clear and asking questions. So we're living in a society today where people are dating, doing online dating and Tinder and hookup, and lots of there's more availability of casual sex as well for those that may be interested, right? But what's happening is people are actually going out and they're starting to go out on dates, but they're not actually asking the questions. So they might become intimate with somebody and they might think that they're kind of dating somebody, but there have never been any expectations or boundaries established regarding it. So managing expectations is kind of like being clear and concise with questions. Are you interested in only a friendship? Are you interested only in something casual? Are you wanting something that's more serious? Yeah. And it's kind of like a filing system for us so that we can establish our own boundaries and put it in a file box and understand where it goes and how it fits. Because otherwise what's happening is, one or more party, generally just in a situation like that, one party specifically may be really upset with the person that they are dating. But if they were to actually just come out and ask the questions, then they would have a better understanding of where they stand with somebody or what that individual's goals are. So it's kind of a little bit of using your voice and overcoming that fear to ask the question, because it'll help eliminate the drama.
Yeah.
And then another thing is even in the workplace, sometimes people have expectations of one another, but they're not actually clearly communicated. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we have expectations of somebody, but they haven't agreed to it. So we, in our mind think that even a coworker should be responsible for something because it's in your opinion, it's in their lane of their work. But maybe the supervisor has decided that they don't want that individual, taking on that responsibility because maybe they're not the right party to actually handle it. That it's been delegated somewhere else, right? And so there can be, through miscommunication, we can have, we can get angry with somebody because we've expected something of them. Now, it's one thing, obviously, if you create an expectation and somebody agrees to it and it's in a verbal or a written agreement, and then you're disappointed by it. But if they haven't actually agreed to it, then what's happening is we're creating this own little drama in our mind, in our hearts, and in our heads for no reason, when it could have actually been prevented through clear communication and expectation management.
Yeah, I guess it's very closely linked to managing assumptions, because that's always something I say. Be very, very careful of the assumptions that you make, because you're almost guessing things and making up your mind and reading other people's minds as well. So I can really see what you're saying in terms of creating clear boundaries around yourself, not just in terms of checking in with others and saying, are we on the same page? Is my understanding correct? But also managing others' expectations of you as well, because then you avoid the disappointment, right?
Absolutely. You're correct.
Yeah. So really your three biggest tips to women to really break down those chains and get out there and find the strength, I guess, to start that business and live the life of your dreams is to really work out what people you need to forgive in your life, whether that's yourself or someone else. So let go of all that negative stuff. The second is obviously show compassion. And I think show compassion to yourself as well. I mean, so many times women are so hard on themselves, and sometimes we just need to say, give yourself a break at the end of the day. And then the third thing is really managing those expectations. Don't make assumptions. Ask people. Make sure that their understanding is the same as your understanding, because that's really going to protect you and help you move forward from things. And I guess if you are working out how to break out and start your own business, you need to manage those expectations of family as well and say, well, this is what I'm going off to do. Maybe don't always share all your dreams with your family, because sometimes the families are not great. They don't necessarily understand it. And in a way, they'll try and protect you by keeping you back and saying, look, I want to wrap you in cotton wool. But certainly help them understand where you're going, manage what they need to expect of you, but what you can give them in that period as well.
Yes, so absolutely correct. And I do believe that for all these wonderful entrepreneurs out there that are wanting to start their own business or live the life of their dreams and find their joy and happiness, these are the key three things to start with.
I mean, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy to talk to you today. Our time is over, though, and I'd love to continue this conversation. I'm sure other people would love to continue this conversation. So tell me, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Carmina Aguirre. I am the founder of La Luce, where we help heal your soul. You can find us at www.laluce.com or at laluce_healing on Instagram.
Wonderful. And I'll include that obviously in the credits and wherever we post this. So thank you again so much to coming to me all the way from Florence. It's been wonderful to chat to you. You're an inspiration as well, because you're young and you are breaking free from those chains of having to work in corporate or getting that 9-to-5 job, and you're really living your dreams. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us again. This has been another episode of Heads Over Heels with your host, Angela Cedron. Have a great one, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of Head Over Heels, the podcast for female entrepreneurs, has ended. But be sure to subscribe for more business strategies and tactics to help you create the profitable and successful business and life you've always dreamed of. And don't forget to rate and review so we can continue to bring you the best content. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.